What's happening? Happy hump day to you and yours. Thank you for joining us. As always, it is much appreciated. Let's talk about the deadline that came and went yesterday. Also, Eliot Wolf's report card at the halfway point. Now that we know the Patriots have played 9 of their 17 games. But we do have one non-deadline, one non-Eliot Wolf note that I wanted to get to quickly. Gerard Mayo told the media earlier this week that Christian Barmore is getting close. Now, he's not practicing today. There's no official timeline, but Mayo says that Barmore is getting close. Hopefully, that means Barmore will be back on the field before the end of the year. As I've said from the very beginning, the biggest concern is the man's health. So hopefully he is on the road to recovery. He's healthy. He's feeling better. And eventually he'll be able to be a part of this football team. He is critical to the operation, as we see with this defensive line. He is one of the team's best players, signed that big fat contract extension in the offseason. So it would be nice to see Christian Barmore back out on that football field. All right. Trade deadline talk first and foremost before I break down Eliot Wolf's first offseason at the midway point of this year. The NFL was busy. The NFL was busy yesterday. Lattimore, Mingo, Mike Williams, and more players were dealt before the trading deadline yesterday. The only move the Patriots made was Joshua Uche. That happened well before the deadline hit yesterday. The Patriots also signed offensive guard Tyrese Robinson off the Vikings practice squad. Robinson has played both guard spots. So you see Michael Jordan taking a little bit of a step back recently. We know that Layden Robinson was thrown at right guard on Sunday for some unknown reason to us, and we know that did not work out well. So maybe the team is looking at some guard depth by bringing Robinson in, and because he signed off the practice squad of Minnesota, he will be on this roster. So Tyrese Robinson was added to the Patriots offensive line mix. So as far as the trading deadline, before we get into what Wolf did in the offseason, didn't do in the offseason, as far as the trading deadline goes, did Eliot Wolf fail the Patriots? I saw that some people were frustrated about Wolf and the inactivity. They wanted something done by the Patriots. I don't think Wolf failed the Patriots yesterday. We had the conversation before the deadline of culture versus capital. The culture of this football team versus the draft capital that you might be trying to get in return by trading one of your veteran players, especially a guy who is on an expiring contract like a Jonathan Jones. You need to compete. This football team needs to compete. Last year ended up being, for all intents and purposes, even though Belichick was not trying to do this, last year was the tank season. For this regime, for Gerard Mayo, for Eliot Wolf, for the coaching staff, for the guys in that locker room, this team needs to compete. And selling off everybody just to sell off everybody, to me, doesn't make sense in this specific situation. You're not going to give guys away. I would not give guys away. I want to make sure that Gerard Mayo is supported. I want to make sure that on a team that isn't filled with a ton of talent or top talent, that we have a chance going into games every single weekend this year with at least a competitive mindset. Very young football team. You want to set some kind of standard, so I would not be just giving guys away. Diana Rossini of The Athletic, she reported that calls were made on Devon Godshaw, KJ Osborne, Kyle Duggar, and Kendrick Bourne. Godshaw, I'm not trading. Their run defense stinks. He's one of the only guys that can consistently do something against the run. If I want to be competitive, I'm not trading from arguably my thinnest spot on this roster, defensive tackle. I'm not doing it. You're going to have Jaquelin Roy as your starting defensive tackle, the guy you picked up a few weeks ago? Doesn't make any sense. And Godshaw, as we've mentioned before, he's a Mayo guy. Kendrick Bourne. I'm not trading Kendrick Bourne. The wide receiver room. Are you comfortable trading Bourne and leaving Jalen Polk and Javon Baker and Pop Douglas? We can put Pop Douglas aside because he's been very good. But are you comfortable with the idea of trading one of your only fully mature wide receivers in that wide receiver room? You think that's a great idea? You think that'll help Polk and Baker? I don't. I want an adult in that room. I want somebody who started to actually build some chemistry with Drake May against the Titans last Sunday. Kendrick had a couple of catches. He's still recovering from the ACL. I would not have traded Kendrick Bourne. Kyle Duggar. I'm not trading Kyle Duggar. Safety is a question, especially in the long term. Duggar can help you run defense. He can also say, I'm a Mayo guy. And he's a playmaker, which you don't have a lot of playmakers on this defense. He's one of your better players. I'm not getting rid of one of my better players. Now, KJ Osborne, Tyquan Thornton, you can take them. You can take them if you want them. But did any other team in the NFL actually want Osborne and Thornton to the point where they would be willing to give up something? If you're an NFL team, Osborne's a rental, right? We all know that Osborne has not been the happiest guy in the world. So would you be willing to part with an asset, even if it was a 6th round pick? Would you give up a pick for Osborne? I would take the risk. I'd say, you know what? Maybe he gets released. And by the way, if Osborne got traded to the Chargers, which was one of the rumors that were thrown out there yesterday by Mike Giardi of BSJ, if Osborne was brought in by another team, he would count as a compensatory free agent against that acquiring team. So that's a detail that I think a lot of people overlooked. Any team that was acquiring Osborne, he would have been counting against that team's compensatory formula when they got to the offseason, which I think made Osborne less valuable to acquire. Tyquan Thornton. You think anybody's interested in Tyquan Thornton? Would you be interested in Tyquan Thornton? I would not be interested in Tyquan Thornton. In wide receiver needy teams, they made other deals. Dallas went out and got Mingo. We know that Mike Williams was traded as well yesterday by the Jets. Teams went out and they got other guys. DeAndre Hopkins was dealt. So Tyquan Thornton and KJ Osborne did not have value. So I don't think anybody was interested enough. All right, before we continue, I have a couple of more thoughts on the trade deadline. Then I want to get to Eliot Wolf's offseason as we are at the midway point of the 2024 season. I'm going to go through some of his most important moves, some of Wolf's most important moves during the offseason, and we will go through each one. We're going to dig deep because I know a lot of people that just say, oh, well, Eliot Wolf sucks. That's it. Done. We're moving on, right? Well, I want to dig in deeper. I want to take a look at what Wolf did and how it's worked out or hasn't worked out. But before I get to that, don't forget, help us out right now. Doesn't cost you any money. Doesn't take a ton of time. Click that thumbs up on the YouTube channel. Every like helps us with engagement. So don't forget to like this podcast. Also, don't forget to throw a comment in. If you agree or disagree with what I'm saying, let me know. Do you think Eliot Wolf messed up by not making any deals aside from Joshua Uche during the trade period that officially ended yesterday afternoon? Throw a comment in. Let me know. More engagement. So don't forget to like. Don't forget to comment. And we're trying to hit 5,000 subscribers. We got a couple of weeks left before Thanksgiving. We need about 200 more subscribers. So if you're watching, you like what we do here, like, comment, and subscribe. Now, some people said that the Patriots should be buyers. I was one of those people. If you had an opportunity to add talent to this roster, and it didn't cost you a ton unless that talent was very talented, if you had a chance to add a young, talented player that had some contract term, then I would have done it if I was Eliot Wolf. Here's the problem. You need young talent to be available. Mingo was one of the only guys that was actually available, that has term on his contract, that would fill a positional need if you believe Mingo would have been an upgrade compared to other receivers in the room. Ojulari is a name that was brought up a lot. The Giants, I read this morning in The Athletic that the Giants wanted a 4th or 5th round pick for Ojulari. Now, the thing is, Ojulari is going to be a rental. Do you think Ojulari is a long-term answer? Do the Patriots think Ojulari is a long-term answer? If you don't think he's a long-term answer, are you willing to give up a fourth-round pick for a guy that you're going to have for the next 2 months, and then he's going to walk into free agency? I don't know how they view him. And I frankly have not watched enough of Ojulari to tell you that I would give up a pick in the 4th round for him to be here for the next 2 months. If he doesn't work out, then you just spent that 4th round pick on somebody who's going to make zero difference for you in the long term. You also have to think about positional priorities versus price. Marshawn Lattimore would have been a nice addition, right? You put him across from Christian Gonzalez, and man, you have 2 very good corners. But Lattimore, I mean, you look at what Washington gave up. They gave up a 3rd. They gave up a 4th. They gave up a 6th. They got Lattimore and a 5th back. At this point in time, are you willing to give up a 3rd round pick, a 4th round pick, a 6th round pick for somebody who, frankly, at that point would be an embarrassment of riches? Is cornerback 2 that much of a need for this football team to give up what Washington had to give up to bring Lattimore in from the Saints? I don't think so. T. Higgins is a guy that I would have traded for. He was not dealt. As a matter of fact, Cincinnati added to their football team. They're going for it. They believe they still have a chance to get to the playoffs. They believe they still have a chance to make a run with Joe Burrow, who just threw 5 touchdowns last weekend. So T. Higgins was not available. So I know people will get frustrated, but tell me who was available that made a lot of sense for this team to acquire. I just don't see it. I really don't see it. And as far as their guys, we went through them one by one. For the most part, the people that were, gaining interest throughout the league, Thornton, Osborne had some interest, but I have to imagine if the Patriots could have gotten a pick worth anything, Osborne would be out of town. My guess. Educated guess, but that would be my thought. All right, let's get to Eliot Wolf and the job that he has done since he took over personnel. I want to look at Wolf's draft, and I also want to look at his top 20 free agent moves since taking over, okay? Now, I do have some guidelines here. I just want to cover some guidelines from a 30,000-foot view before I jump in. Number one, the job of Eliot Wolf is to build this roster for the long term, not for 2024, but for the long term. And I said at the beginning of this, I'm going to give Wolf 2 full off seasons to prove to me that he can start building up this roster. Okay. That's guideline number one. We have to understand that the job of Wolf is to think about the long-term future of this program. Before I get to guideline 2, I want to jump to a couple of super chats. Vitalix sends a $10 super chat. Just want you to know Evan Lazar is live right now, and I chose you. Cheers, Nick. Well, I appreciate that, Vitalix. Evan is great at what he does. So I appreciate you choosing me today. And I'm sure you'll check out what Evan had to say looking back on YouTube. But I do appreciate it. I'm a fan of Evan's work, and he's just full of great ideas, and he just pounds. He pounds away on the beat. So thank you. I appreciate it. Anonymous with a $19.99 super chat. Me too at Vitalix. Always pick Nick live when I can. Well, thank you again, Anonymous, for the $19.99 super chat. Vitalix, Anonymous coming through. Send your super chat to jump to the front of the line with a quote, a question, a comment, whatever you got. All right, guideline number 2 before we break down Eliot Wolf's offseason at the midway point of this year. Draft grades are fluid. I personally do not enjoy evaluating rookies 6 weeks in, 8 weeks in, 10 weeks in. I try to give every rookie that's drafted in the top 4 rounds, I try to give every single one of those guys out of the draft class 2 years to evaluate them. I think that's the fairest way. You might disagree. That's cool. We'll agree to disagree. I don't like saying, oh, that guy's a bust 7 weeks in, 8 weeks in. I don't even like calling somebody a bust after year one. So I am going to give you my thoughts on the draft so far, but we have to keep in mind 30,000 feet. This draft will be decided by the middle to the end of next season. We should all understand that. Number 3, I'm not including extensions because that's about future years. I can't judge the extension based off of the year that the player was going to be here already, right? So if they had a deal and they tacked on years like Ramondre Stevenson, he's not going to be a part of this conversation, even though I do think that makes Wolf look a little bit better. I'm not going to add somebody like Ramondre Stevenson because that contract extension is all about 2025 through 2028. And if next year Mondre looks like he's broken down and dead, then we say the extension stunk. So no extensions included here. 4th guideline, coaching matters. I'll give you an example. Does Alex Van Pelt hurt Jalen Polk? Does he hurt Javon Baker? Does he hurt Jaheim Bell? I am not won over, far from it as a matter of fact, by Alex Van Pelt's work. I don't think he's done a particularly very good job as the offensive coordinator to this point. So if you had another offensive coordinator that was doing some things differently, would you have more production out of Jalen Polk? I don't know that answer, but coaching impacts players. Coaching also impacts players with the allocation of snaps. I think Antonio Gibson should be playing more. I think Gibson is one of the most talented players on this offense. For the life of me, I can't tell you why Van Pelt is not playing Gibson more. When Gibson signed, we said perfect third down back, perfect receiving kind of back. Hopefully he's out there like James White used to be out there. I feel like Gibson's on the back of a milk carton for long stretches of football games. So coaching matters. Van Pelt impacts these offensive players. Covington impacts the defensive players. You know what else matters? Here's my final guideline before we get into breaking down Eliot Wolf's decisions. Injuries. Now, I know some people that are on the radio, on TV, doing podcasts, they try to tell you that injuries don't matter. I find that to be incredibly disingenuous. Do you think the Patriots win the Super Bowl against the Giants second time around if Rob Gronkowski is healthy? I personally do. I think when your best offensive player, aside from Tom Brady, is on one leg, I think that inherently impacts the game. And I think that inherently impacts the result. So I believe injuries matter. When you're Eliot Wolf or any GM, you're putting the team together on paper. You can't predict injuries. You just can't. So injuries matter. All right. That said, I'm going to get into my Eliot Wolf evaluation at the midway point of his first season as the personnel leader of the Patriots. Let's start with the draft. I know it's backwards because you do free agency first in the offseason, but I want to start off with the draft because, as I said just a few moments ago, Wolf's number one priority is building this roster for the long term, for the future, and that starts with the draft. Wolf has come out. Mayo's talked about it. They want to be a draft and develop football team. So, first pick, Drake May. I'm going to guess nobody at this point has a problem with that pick. I would say it's an A-plus pick. I would say Drake May was a home freaking run by Eliot Wolf. And here's what I'm not going to allow. I'm not going to allow people, because I've gotten this on Twitter, shocker, I'm not going to allow people to tell me that Drake May was the easy pick. Oh, he's the easy pick. That was the obvious pick. We're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. I'll tell you why we're not going to do that. Because I did a bunch of podcasts leading up to the draft, hearing from many of you and hearing from people on the radio. And many of you, not all of you, but many of you were saying, you know what? I kind of like that J.J. McCarthy guy. Many of you were saying, Hey, you know what? The Patriots should trade down, get more picks, pick McCarthy, then pick somebody else later in the first round. I had a lot of people. Screaming from the mountaintops for Marvin Harrison Jr. So I'm not going to allow this revisionist history that Drake May he was their gift wrapped for Eliot Wolf. When I heard from plenty of you and plenty of others outside of the podcast world that it'd be insane if you didn't draft Marvin Harrison Jr. Generational wide receiver. They should trade down and get more picks. They should trade down and draft somebody like Joe Alt. So we're not going to play that game. Home run pick by Wolf, sticking and picking. Looks like it was the right call. Looks like he picked the right guy. Jalen Polk, obvious. So far, he's an F. Drops, penalties, going on social media. I'm shocked that Jalen Polk has been as ineffective as he's been. I was a fan of his at Washington. I like the pick. I still like the pick. But I am shocked because coming out of Washington, two of the things that you were really confident in regarding Polk was his hands and his character. And both of those things have fallen short the last month or so. I'm shocked by that. I hope he gets back on the rails because I do think he's a good football player. And I saw him at camp, and he had a really good camp. I don't know what the hell's going on. But Jalen Polk, to this point, F. Caden Wallace, incomplete. I'm giving you an incomplete for Caden Wallace because he's played all of 70 snaps of football. I have no earthly idea what Caden Wallace is. He's been hurt, so he gets an incomplete. Layden Robinson. I'm going to give Layden Robinson a C-. He started well. Then he hit the rookie wall. Then he got hurt. And then we just saw him last week coming back from an injury, thrown into the deep end at right guard against one of the best defensive tackles in football in Jeffrey Simmons. So I'm going to give Robinson a C- because, again, he got off to a pretty good start. He hasn't been a complete waste. Baker, so far, F. He had tons of drops during camp. He's had off-field issues. He's run his mouth a little bit too much. So far, Javon Baker's an F, okay? Now, I'm not going to grade guys beyond the fourth round because those are what I call lottery tickets. I'm focused on the top 4 rounds. If you hit somebody in the 6th round, like a Pop Douglas, maybe even a Kayshon Boutte, awesome. Thumbs up. Good job. Perfect. But I don't expect guys in the 5th, 6th, and 7th rounds to be anything just yet, right? Or maybe ever. A lot of those guys don't make teams coming out of the draft. So I pay attention to the top 4 rounds. So to me, Drake May is an A+, Polk is an F, Baker's an F, Robinson's a C-, Wallace is incomplete because he's only played 70 snaps and he's been hurt for a while. All right, I'm going to get into free agency. Before I get into free agency, don't forget, give us that thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube right now. Give us the thumbs up if you're watching on demand. Thumbs in the air means more eyeballs for us. So take a second of your time. Doesn't cost you any money. Click that thumbs up. Throw a comment in. Do you agree or disagree with my thoughts on the draft so far up to this point? Again, big picture, I don't personally think it's fair to label a rookie as a bust or he's awful, 8-9 weeks into his rookie season. That's how I feel. I'm sure some of you disagree with that, which is fine. So throw a comment in, and don't forget to subscribe. Let's go to Terry, $50 super chat. Hooah! From Al Pacino back in the day. Scent of a woman. Reading the tea leaves, the Crafts will keep Mayo and Wolf, but otherwise, who needs to be gone? Players and or coaches? Oof. All right. Again, players, it's difficult right now because I want to see how they finish. They got a young team. I'm not writing off Polk. Polk, if he has a really solid last 5 or 6 weeks, everybody's going to shut up and say it was a good pick. So I'm not playing that game. I'm not going to play that game with any of the rookies. I think the rookies pretty much are all going to be here. Maybe Javon Baker is gone if he continues to not necessarily gel with the operation. But I think, the rookies, I feel pretty confident that they'll be here in year 2, even if they don't turn things around. Other players, I mean, boy, Godshaw could get moved, but I doubt it. Jonathan Jones, I wouldn't be surprised if Jones is gone because he's, 31 years old. I would imagine they want to get younger at corner, opposite of Christian Gonzalez. Guy like Jalen Hawkins, who knows? He's on a 1-year deal. He might come back on cheap money. He might be gone. Tavai signed an extension, as we know, so I don't think he's going anywhere. I'm trying to think of other names. Players are rough. Jacoby Brissett will be interesting. Does Jacoby want to hang around and be the backup? We'll see. Will the Patriots want Jacoby to hang around and be the backup? You would imagine they want Joe Milton to be the number 2 guy. So Jacoby could be gone. Antonio Gibson, I could see him gone if he doesn't get more playing time. Coaches, Alex Van Pelt's tops on the list right now for me. I don't know if Van Pelt will survive the season. Covington, if this continues, I could see the Patriots go out and get, a more experienced defensive coordinator. I think Springer's been okay. Special teams has been okay. Some issues, obviously, shanked punts last week. They've had, some problems recently, but I'd say Alex Van Pelt's the top guy right now on that coaching staff. I think the offensive line coach, Scott Peters, Robert Kugler, those 2 guys, I think they've done really good. Tyler Hughes, by the way, wide receiver coach, I think he could be in trouble. So thank you, Terry, for the $50 super chat. It is very much appreciated. All right, let's get free agency now. And I understand that many of you will disagree with my grades. That's fine. We all grade differently. I know people are very frustrated by what they see, and they probably just want to burn everything down, which is cool. That's good. If that's your deal. All right, number 1, let's start with Mike Onwenu. I'm going to give Mike Onwenu a C. And for people going, whoa, he hasn't been very good. No, he hasn't been very good. But here's my point. Imagine this offensive line without Mike Onwenu, especially at the beginning of the year. They've been better recently. But what happens if you don't bring back Mike Onwenu? I mean, it would be even worse. I think it was vital to bring him back. I think, he's going to be fine. I think it's a coaching thing with Onwenu. Keep him at guard. He was fine on Sunday at guard. Did a pretty good job against Simmons when they made that change. Keep him at guard. So I'm giving Onwenu a C. Jacoby Brissett, I'm giving Jacoby Brissett a C-. Again, you have to think about expectations. What were your expectations for Jacoby Brissett? When you think about the offensive line play, when you think about Van Pelt, when you think about Jacoby's expectation level to begin with, C-. He is who he is. He kept you in games. He's responsible for both wins. Didn't cost you a lot of money. I'll say C-. Antonio Gibson is a D. I wish I'd see more of Antonio Gibson. As I said earlier, not sure why he's not playing more. I think he could help this football team. I think he's an impact kind of guy out of the backfield as a receiver. You can line him up in different spots. I don't think AVP is creative enough to use him, apparently. But Gibson hasn't done anything, so he's a D. Austin Hooper, D. Hardly any impact at all. Nick Leverett, D. Not an F. People might say, how do you not give Nick Leverett an F? I'm going to give him a slight break and give him a D because he was not signed as a center. Nick Leverett was signed as a guard. His primary position is guard. He took over as backup center because Jake Andrews got hurt. Antonio Mafi was a dumpster fire at center. So I don't think that's fair to Leverett to label him an F because he was playing out of position. So I'll give you a D. Not a passing grade, not close, but I'll give you a D, not an F. Chooks, this is going to be very polarizing. I couldn't care less. I've said this from when Chooks left the team. It was a mental health situation, according to Phil Perry. I do not touch mental health situations because I don't know what's going on in somebody's life. I obviously don't think that Eliot Wolf could predict that Chukwuekorafo was going to have some mental health challenges or issues or obstacles and would leave the team. So I'm going to give Chooks an incomplete because of the delicate nature of his situation. If you disagree, fine. I get it. That's what I'm doing. These are my grades. All right. Anthony Jennings. I'm giving Jennings an A. He has improved in the pass rush. He has been great against the run. Anthony Jennings, that contract, that's an A. Kyle Duggar. I'm going to give Duggar a D. Again, I have to question the coaching. DeMarcus Covington. I think Duggar should primarily be a guy in the box making plays downhill. They still have him covering at times, which I think is a big swing and a miss. But I'll give Duggar a D because I just don't think he's been good enough. Maybe that's a little bit harsh, but I'll go D. Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry is a B+. He's a B+. Can you imagine this passing offense without Hunter Henry? He's been captain dependable. He's been healthy. He has helped out Drake May a ton. Hunter Henry's a B+. Joshua Uche, D. It was a 1-year short-term money deal, so it's not an F. He signed for like $3 million, but he's a D. And at least you got an asset. At least you got an asset in return for Uche, and he didn't walk for nothing. All right, I've got more. That's the top 10, or at least the first 10 free agent signings. I'll get to the next 10 in a second, but don't forget to help us out. Like, comment, subscribe. And from my Spotify, Apple Pods people, you're listening on demand. Don't forget to rate and review. And you can swing on by the YouTube channel and you can give us a like. Click that thumbs up and then go right back to Spotify and Apple Pods. All right. Next up is Sione Takitaki. Incomplete. He's hurt. He's just back. I think I'll be able to give him a grade within the next 2 or 3 weeks. He played a little bit on Sunday. If he doesn't get back on the field, he doesn't make much impact. He's obviously going to be an F. But for now, he missed a bunch of the front of the season due to injury, so I'm going to give him an incomplete. KJ Osborne, F. Come on now. I mean, he's got 1 touchdown catch, but he has not given you nearly enough on the field. He's been a little bit of a malcontent off the field, or at least was a couple weeks ago. Osborne's an F. Armon Watts. Do you even remember Armon Watts? Probably not, which makes him an F. Re-signing Kendrick Bourne. Incomplete. I like the move. I think by the end of the year, re-signing Kendrick Bourne is going to be a passing grade, but I'm giving him an incomplete because he's coming back from an ACL tear. So I want to give him a few more weeks. And there was a few catches last week's game. Maybe he's got some chemistry going with Drake May, but I'm going to give Kendrick Bourne an incomplete for right now because of the ACL. Few weeks I'll be able to answer that better. Joey Sly, B+. Do you remember 2023? Every time a kick was going to happen, your heart was in your throat. Joey Sly is a B+, good signing. Jalen Hawkins, I'm going to give Jalen Hawkins a C. There's been some good. There's been some not so good, but he's played a bunch of snaps. He hasn't really stood out by being a disaster. He's made some plays here and there. So I think Jalen Hawkins is a solid C. Nothing great, nothing terrible. I give that a C. Mostly meeting expectations. Ben Brown, I give that move a B. I give that move a B because you lose David Andrews. Leverett doesn't work out. It's a great adjustment by the front office. They were ready to go out there and sign somebody like Brown. Now, is he great? No. But given the circumstances, obviously last week he was on the struggle bus when he had to go against Jeffrey Simmons. Obviously, he was on the struggle bus against Quinnen Williams. Those are 2 of the best defensive tackles in football. Given your expectations for somebody like Ben Brown, I think that is a solid signing. I give that a B. I think that's good. Michael Jordan. If this was 3 weeks ago, I would have said Michael Jordan was a B. But he's starting to fall off a little bit. So I'm going to say that Michael Jordan is a C-. So I give Jordan a C- because of his recent play. And if the recent play continues, by the end of the year, he's going to be a D or an F. But Jordan, through the first 6 weeks of this season or so, was one of the only solid contributors on the offensive line consistently. So I'm going to give him a C- as of right now. Then we get to the trade. The Matthew Judon trade is an A. It's an absolute A. Judon has done almost nothing for the Atlanta Falcons. He has 1.5 sacks in 9 games. He's done almost nothing. You can look at the stats that he had last year for the Patriots in 4 games, and some of them are better than what he's done with the Falcons over 9 games. If that continues, that is highway robbery. If Judon continues to play the way he's playing the rest of the year, that moves up from an A to an A+. Getting a 3rd-round pick for a guy that's not doing much, that's a fantastic trade. That's an A. He hired Alex Van Pelt. That is a big, fat F. You know why. I've talked enough about it. Hiring AVP was a big, fat F. Now, could other things have happened? Sure. But we don't know who was actually available. We don't know who actually would have signed with the Patriots if they were offered contracts. So I don't go into these, conspiracy theories. I look at what was actually done and I grade it. So I went through the draft. I went through free agency. I gave you the biggest trade made with Matthew Judon. And I gave you the hiring of Alex Van Pelt. So those were 20 moves between free agency, the trade, and the hire of AVP. And I gave you the picks in the top 4 rounds. I gave you grades for those guys. Here is the final tally. Here is the final tally regarding Eliot Wolf's midway point grade. So currently overall, what I did was I took the passing grades, I took the failing grades. Eliot Wolf has 9 passing grades, anything from a C- and above. He has 9 passing grades. He has 8 failing grades, and he has 3 incompletes. Now, people will say, Nick, he has more passing grades than failing grades. Doesn't mean he's doing a good job. So what I do is I say, what's his score? His score is a 53. His score is a 53, which would result in a D-. So at the midway point, we'll see if this changes over the next, 8 weeks or so, 10 weeks. I'm going to give Eliot Wolf a 53, which is a D-. That is Wolf's grade, a D- at the midway point of this season. Now, he has some opportunity. Can Jalen Polk and Javon Baker turn things around? Can he end up, can those 2 guys end up being something more than they've been? We'll have to wait and see. Can Caden Wallace get on the football field and give them something? We'll have to see. Can Kendrick Bourne maybe pick up some momentum, give them some production? We'll see if that happens. But as of right now, I give Wolf a D-, a failing grade, no doubt, hands down. Period, end of sentence. He has a failing grade halfway through this season. We'll see if this roster can recover somewhat over the second half. And if it does, then that grade will go slightly up, or maybe it'll go up significantly. If it doesn't, the grade will get worse, and we'll say he totally tanked the first offseason. Keep in mind, I remain patient with rookies. I know many of you, some of you don't. That's cool. I do. Patience is a virtue. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to comment. Don't forget to subscribe. Those 3 things help us build this community. Don't cost you a cent. Doesn't take much time at all. I appreciate every single one of you. I'm back on Friday at 3 p.m. to do a preview of the Bears game. Tomorrow night, 7 p.m., my NFL podcast. I talk NFL, some of the top storylines, and we got a lot. Trade deadline, a head coach got fired. Tomorrow night, 7 p.m. on this YouTube channel. I'll sit here. I will have a craft beer, and I will talk some football with you tomorrow night at 7 p.m. I appreciate every single one of you. Got to sneak this in. Greg Fields throws in a $5 super chat. Great breakdown on Wolf. After this, I cannot see him being kept on board. Well, again, he's got the rest of the season. And I said, to be fair to him, I'm giving him 2 off seasons. If his first draft class ends up being good, that's the most important thing, right? So I still need to see a lot more from those guys. But I appreciate the $5 super chat, Greg. It is always nice to see people supporting the program financially. All right, tomorrow, 7 p.m., live, YouTube. We got Crafts and Kickoffs, NFL podcast, 3 p.m., live, Friday. Preview the Bears game. Till then, be well, take care of yourself. It's the Nick Cattle Show.